Oi, no frizzing Wisbies in the common room. I will confiscate that.
Oh, hello. You do seem to be looking better. The last time I saw you was the bloodshed incident. If it does make you feel better, Argyle seemed to have pinpoint accuracy during that match against Ravenclaw. It was a very big help in the win. I'm sure our captain was very happy. How may I help you today? Oh, of course, studying for exam is very exciting. I only have one newt left to go. That's potions. I don't really need much studying. What subjects would you need help for? All of them. Well, I'm not a big help at divination, but I can help with your other subjects. Do you have your books? Very good, very good. Let's see. We have Queen's Poisoner, Potions book, of course. This one was one of my favourites in my first and second year. Fond memories. We'll come back to it. Of course, the 5 Tales of Transfiguration. I don't actually think I've read all of them. Maybe 3 all the way through. I understand the story behind them, as well as some of the practices inside them. We also have magical indoor plants, Herbology, of course. This one has useful pictures in it. Some of the later Herbology books do not have pictures, so it's good to keep these around in case you want an accurate look at some of the plants we'll be working with. Good. And finally, the Disenchanted Charms. Must be new, of course. It's not any book I've ever used for charms, especially not my first year. I think this would be a good place to start. Finding a good spot to quiz you with will be a bit from a book that I'm not quite familiar with. Obviously, there are parts that will be similar to books that I had. Here we are. I'm going to have you answer the question with the spell that I am describing. This charm is used for making an object float or levitate. It is done with a swish and flick motion, done in one forward motion. Yes, of course. Wingardium Leviosa. Very good. Very good. A very simple spell, but once mastered, can be used almost as an actual summoning charm or banishing charm, depending on how it's used. Of course, there are better spells used for summoning and repelling items. Of course, we have the Wand Illumination charm, which ignites the end of a user's wand to create light. Yes, very good, Lumos. And the counterpart to this charm The Extinguishing Charm. Knocks. Very good. Very good. Seems to go into a bit more detail in our first Charms book, did? This spell gives a lot more detail in this book than it did. But what does the spell Incendio do? That is correct. It conjures a jet of fire to set something alight. It does go into much more detail within my book. Incendio was just how to set things on fire. I'm sure it said more than that, but that's what it said Incendio did. Conjures a jet of fire. That's a little bit more specific. I like the wording of it better. What does the spell Spongify do? Yes, it is in the name, isn't it? It does create a softening to the object, as well as make them more rubbery and bouncy. Combination of the three. Spongify can be used for a multitude of things, especially when something has become too hard for you to use, or when falling onto something that could possibly be painful. Spongify can be used to prevent further pain. It might not stop your injury, but it might prevent further injury. My brother, older brother, you may have met him at Gringotts, fell off a cliff when he was younger. Luckily, my older brother, who you may have met at Weasley's Wands, used it to create a cushion at the bottom where rocks were found. May have saved his life. Next question. A spell for unlocking objects such as doors or trunks. Good, Alohomora. And the opposite for locking objects and preventing them from being unlocked manually is Colloportus, of course. Yes. It's less known. Most people like to open locks rather than lock them, but it's good to know both sides in case. Of course, Alohomora will open Colloportus, but of course Colloportus is good to have if you're trying to prevent, say, a muggle from entering something you might not want them to see. Very useful. And probably one of the most useful spells, especially here at Hogwarts, is the spell for repairing or restoring a broken object. Reparo, of course, very nice. Yes, I once broke my entire vial of dragon's blood. Now, I was a little hesitant to use the dragon's blood afterward, but it was very easy to sell to someone who didn't quite know that it had been slightly tainted. Now, of course, that's a little unethical, but when you're selling to someone who's already been a not so nice person, I'm not too worried about it. But it repaired the whole bottle with the dragon's blood back in it. But tainted, of course. And bonus, do you know the charm for severing? Do you know what the charm is called? Findo, of course. Very nice. I think you'll do well on charms. I think we'll end charms there. How about we move to Herbology, of course. So, let's see. I did not choose to go into noobs, but of course, I could have. This more advanced class, let me get into something that you might know a bit more of. Not sure how many muggle plants you might know, but it seems this book also has a few bits of muggle plants. I guess we'll start with here. Could you identify the colours of the bouncing ball? Good, good. A purple bulb with green leaves and obvious green stem. Very nice. Yes, of course it does bounce. What it does. Very useful in potions. Asphadel, a member of the lily family, is used in what potions? Yes, the Wiggenweld potion and the Draught of Living Dead. Very good, I was hoping you would remember. As well as this bitter herb is used by muggle medics. As I said, there are muggle remedies in here as well. It is used by muggle medics and has been used in potions such as the elixir to induce euphoria, Draught of the Living Dead, and the shrinking solution since ancient times. Very common used ingredients. Wormwood, yes, very good. Very good. I see they have a lot of medicinal cacti in here. You wouldn't believe that much of the cacti is actually very magical. Most of the juices that are inside of cacti, which can induce, let's say, hallucinogenic feel in a muggle, can also produce a intellectual hallucination in wizards or witches. Their understanding isn't quite as powerful as ours, so their mind wanders into things of uncomprehension, whereas ours, we can understand because we know, and we imagine and feel things that can be or will be. I know that cactus juice is used in divination, used by humans and non-human alike. I've been told by a few students who study care of magical creatures that the centaurs use them to help predict the future more accurately and a little bit more precisely. You know that centaurs use a more wide and broad, less specific version of divination to see the future, but they use this concoction to narrow down the pinhole in which they look. Sorry to distract you into divination. I know I said I wasn't very good at divination, but I do understand some of the practices of it and respect them. We'll get back to herbology. What are two other names for the wolfbane plant? Most people just call it wolfsbane, but it is, of course, as you have just said, referred to as aconite, monkshood. Very good. Ah, dangerous plants. Dangerous plants. Devil Snare is a dangerous plant. What does it do, and what is an effective way to get rid of it? Very good. Devil Snare is an ensnaring plant, of course. Has the ability to strangle anything in its surrounding area, as well as be useful in an assassination attempt, of course. Do not do this. It was once used to place as a house plant next to someone, to strangle them. And of course, to fight, you use a high potent light spell or fire spell. They freeze in the light and retreat from fire. Always remember that. Freeze in light, but retreat from fire. If you find yourself constricted by one, freeze it and then help retreat it. Now let's move on to Transfiguration. I don't want to overwhelm your head too much, especially because Transfiguration is my weakest subject, of course. I will be honest. I, of course, got an A in my owl, but A is not acceptable enough to make it into the newt class. So I unfortunately will not be able to be taking that newt, which is actually taking place now, which is why I'm even in the common room. Let's see. I know the few things that we learned in the first year. Not too sure on the spells though. How well are you at Transfiguration? Good. Good enough to get an E in your owl coming in a few years, I hope. There we are. Chapter on components, Transfiguration. Can you name 2 of the 5 components of the Transfiguration formula? I know 4 of them. I was going to look at and see if there was 5th ones in this book, because I don't remember reading it in the long book, of course. Yes, of course. Body weight is one of them. On power. Yes, wonderful. The other 2 that I remember are viciousness and the concentration. So what those mean is body weight is not your own body weight, but the weight of the body in which you are transfiguring, both before and after. That takes place in the calculation from before to after, of course. Viciousness is, of course, how much of your own ability you must force into that object to transform the object into what you want. Most people believe that's what 1 power is, but 1 power is actually the amount of flowing magic you use out of the wand. You must maintain a consistent and controlled amount of magic out of your wand to consistently transform the entire object. As well as concentration. Concentration is the amount of focus you are putting on the object you are doing. If you lose focus for even half a second, you could prevent a piece of whatever you're transfiguring from transforming. And the 5th one I cannot find. The 5th one still seems to be unknown to me. That's a question not for me. I apologize. But at least I know those 4. Maybe it's the 5th one that helps me get that E in my owl. Okay. Very simple incantation that I do happen to remember. I just didn't remember till seeing it in this book right now. Is the incantation for transfiguring an object into a matchbook. It's very simple. A lot of transfigurations have this part of the word to it. Correct. Fintifals. The false part is, of course, the portion in which Transfiguration thrives. The Transfiguration spell used to transform an object into a bird, of course, follows the same formula. Avifals. Yes, very good, very good. Now, as I'm not very familiar with some of these stories, I think that should be enough for Transfiguration. Hoping that's not going to be that much of a problem for you. You seem to understand Transfiguration very well. And why not end with my favourite? My favourite, of course, being potions. Queen's Poisoner was probably one of my favourite books through my first and second year. Not only does it have the spells and incantations used by 16th century wizards, it has all of the potions and elixirs used in the 14th century, which of course is when most early potions were invented. That there allowed potions to progress further and got us to the potions books that we have today and potions that we do have today. Of course, some of those early potions were some of my favourite, including but not limited to Polyjuice potion, the elixir to induce euphoria, as well as the most famous love potion of all, known to smell and taste different to each person who is, I guess, unfortunate to take such potion. Let's see. Looks like the potions themselves are more in the middle of the book, and ingredients and information at the end, whereas the front seems to be a history of those who invented potions early on. The front of the book was never my favourite. Of course, I liked learning about those who invented potions, but not quite their personal life, more on the actual process of creating potions, which is fascinating to me. Imagine one day sitting down at a table with a bunch of random ingredients, only to discover that the thing that you've put into a pot cures a magical ailment that has never been cured before. To work on something to not only help the world, but possibly prevent something evil from happening has always fascinated me. How potions can prevent people from dying on the brink of death, how it can force people to do terrible things, but also relieve them from terrible things, to spill their inner secrets, or help those who unfortunately cannot help themselves. Some potions, like the Felix Felicis, which is highly debated among many potions masters, whether or not it actually does anything, which I don't believe it does. I believe it is a placebo, or a fake potion that, when created correctly, gives you a false impression of luck, or maybe an increased amount of confidence, in which your luck seems to go better, but not quite, because I don't think you could actually bottle luck. I believe it would be something impossible to calculate. I believe those who have correctly brewed Felix Felicis agree with me that once the effort has been put into it, the effects of the potion do not outweigh the amount of effort. And that right there seems to me like it doesn't quite do what it does. Now, of course, if you hadn't spent the many months trying to create it, you don't understand the amount of work or difficulty to create this potion. I think that helps in allowing the user to trick their own mind into believing that they have ingested luck. I'm sorry for diving off into a tangent before I even asked you a single potions question, but of course I find it fascinating. Now the sleeping draught, which of course we've done before, do you know what the first ingredient that we added was? Not a very simple question, and I'm sure it won't come up on a exam. I'm just quite curious as to whether you remember what the first ingredient that we ever used was. That is correct. It was lavender. Do you know specifically how much? 4 sprigs it was. Very good. Used in the creation of most antidotes, specifically the antidote for common poisons, the bezoar, a cure itself for most minor poisons, can be found where? Very good. In the stomach of a goat. They of course are rare and form only when a goat has had specific food or magical items ingested, but they can be procured without hurting the goat and are very useful. My favorite thing is using a bezoar as a potion, because most people believe that bezoars have a magical healing ability when it comes to potions, but they don't. What they do is stop potions or poisons from doing more damage. The bezoar is a stop, not a reverse. But using a bezoar in an antidote can boost the bezoar's effect as it's intended, and will help reverse a poison that has been used. Antidotes, of course, are much better than a bezoar. Bezoars are for stopping, antidotes are for saving. What potion is used for enlarging an object or parts of an object? Yes, of course, swelling solution, and its counterpart used to reduce the size of an object or parts of an object. Yes, much simply named the shrinking solution. Very nice. Now, what is the possible outcome of using a dirty cauldron when making a potion? Yes, the most common outcome is that your potion becomes a poison. Not very useful, especially when trying to create an elixir. not want an elixir becoming a poison. That will make it much, much more potent, because then it will actually be 2 poisons. Now, what are the other objects or instruments needed for potions making besides a cauldron? Now, of course, the cauldron being the most important. Yes. Scales, more specifically brass, are better. A wand, of course. And the pestle and mortar, which are useful with each other, but useless without. Now, of course, you'll also need glass or crystal glasses, or bottles, or vials for your potions, of course. Can't collect your potion in nothing. There's nothing more disappointing than creating a potion and having to throw it away because you have nowhere to store it. I'm thinking that might be enough potions questions. No, I've got a few more. What ingredient added to Polyjuice potion is the one that allows the user to transform? Yes, hair. More specifically DNA, but hair is most commonly used for Polyjuice potion. It is the easiest to obtain for readily available use, as well as it is probably the least unappealing piece of DNA. Not sure many people want to ingest blood or spit, though spit might not be effective enough to actually maintain the form for what is supposed to be an hour. I believe that should be good. I know I said I've had a few more questions, but I've rather enjoyed chatting more. I'd rather think you understand the basics, especially of potions, and I would hope that you would ask questions if you didn't, especially to someone who knows potions quite well. Now, was there maybe anything else that I could possibly help you out with? I know those were your main subjects that you needed help with. No? Very good. Go help your fellow Slytherins get points, and I look forward to winning the House Cup. Good luck on your exams, and have a great evening.